Commission. I've been asked to step in for Davis, my boss, who, because of unavoidable circumstances, is not here to make this presentation. So, maybe perhaps about Kenya Human Rights Commission. Kenya Human Rights Commission was established in 1992 by people I consider to be part and parcel of the struggle for the second liberation in Kenya. So when they were exiled in the USA, the idea of forming a human rights organization cropped up. So the entire conceptualization of Kenya Human Rights Commission was done in 1992 in the US, but later on in 1994, the institution was now established in Kenya as a non-government organization, if you remember the 1990 NGO Act. Now, 1992-1994 coincides with the peak for agitation for reforms in this country. And that explains why Kenya Human Rights Commission history cannot be written without linkages with the broader struggle for reforms in Kenya. Now, as you all know, being an non-government organization, there are things we can do as an advocacy group, but there are things that will require engagement with the political class. And it's well written in our legacy that some of the things that we were later to achieve as a country, the broadening of the political space through the overhaul of Section 2A to allow for multi-party democracy, and eventually the fight for constitutional reforms that culminated in the 2010 Constitution, meant that as we pushed for change as civil society, there are things that could only happen when civil society worked closely with progressive political figures. And this is why I want to locate Raila Odinga as somebody who worked very closely with the human rights organization to see to it that we are able to broaden the democratic space. So on many occasions, Kenya Human Rights Commission was working closely with progressive opposition figures, mostly in strategy meetings, mostly in crafting legal and policy reforms that will ultimately then inform the 2010 Constitution. So then we consider Raila Amolo as a human rights defender #1. Because as much as he was very active in the political field, he stood for social justice. And Raila lived that life all the time, as much as he was in the executive, sometimes in the political parties, but had not lost touch with the ordinary mwananchi. And that explains why Raila will easily gel with the local population, grassroots communities, because he spoke the language of social justice. He did the politics that ultimately was to benefit those very vulnerable people in the society. So his fight for constitutional change and the role that Kenya Human Rights Commission played in the civil society sector more or less complemented each other. So as we sat with political parties in boardrooms, in the bombers, and in other spaces, these meetings and outcomes of these meetings largely informed what will ultimately be in our constitution. Of course, this benefits a lot from comparisons of constitutions across the world, and I know largely Kenyan constitution also borrowed largely from the South African framework. So I stand here to say that Raila fought for democracy, fought for human rights, but he fought for it differently, both in the political cycles and even in the human rights arena. I just want to draw reference to our visit last 2 or 3 weeks ago, when as civil society we paid visit to Mama Ida. At first, I got this feeling that Mama Ida did not quite understand where we were coming from. But when she got the connection between the kind of work we do and how Raila was critical in that work, I think she was very much excited. And one of the things that they did say, that as they do the library now at the Kango Jaramogi, they will dedicate a chapter in the write-up about Raila Odinga and the civil society groups. So as we commemorate this and looking forward, I think it behoves us as civil society organization, political parties, to continue cherishing those very, very values of social justice, human rights, non-discrimination, even as we organize and aspire to lead this country. I think the best that we can do to honor the late Honorable Raila Odinga is to live by those very, very aspirations that he stood for, he fought for so many years. With those few remarks, thank you very much, and I wish you a fruitful discussion.
Thank you very much, Cornelius. I know I ambushed you, but Davis fell ill, and that is what deputies do. It's just they carry the load when the bosses are not there. This is an interesting space. The Center for Multi-Party Democracy is an interesting and important space because sometimes you occupy this space as a multi-party democracy and take it for granted. But the struggle for Kenya to be and to remain a multi-party democracy has been long. It goes back very, very many years. It has taken many iterations. I remember, I think, well, I wasn't there, but the history remembers that there was an attempt to form a union in 1966 called the Kenya People's Union, which was frustrated. And then thereafter, there have been many, many, many other attempts. And so you find, I think, some of the membership in the room, they have names like Alliance, Union, Forum, Congress, Trust, and all those iterations they mirror the struggle to keep alive public voice, public political voice. And political parties are such an important channel for public voice that runs through the life of Raila Odinga, because all those names that I was mentioning about Trust, Congress, Forum, Union, Alliance are timelines. They are timelines in Raila Odinga's life because he was actually involved in all of them around 1969. He was setting up the Europe chapter of KPU. When he was in exile in 1992, he was setting up the Ford branch for Europe, and so on and so forth. And so many of us are beneficiaries of that effort. So the importance of the political party cannot be gainsaid. However, there was also a recognition that political voice only goes so far. There is also civic voice. And he said a lot of things about what people in civil society do or ought to do. And for it's amazing, I think, that I cannot recall a moment when Raila and civil society were at different positions. Their positions seemed to align a lot. I bring now the benefit of my few years' experience. I'm looking at Prof. and Oduor, who have slightly longer memories. And now I don't want to sound like I'm a little old. I'm probably younger than that. However, Raila Odinga was the first person to start a private prosecution for corruption. And in the room today, we have the SAR, the anti-corruption SAR, the sheriff at Transparency International, and we know what they do at Transparency International. but they run on the fuel. They run on the fumes and the fuel of what Raila Odinga planted in taking George Saitoti, no offense to KANU members and other parties that he belonged to thereafter, but he took George Saitoti to court in an attempt to get to the bottom of the Golden Back affair. I would like to invite Sheila Masinda, and as she comes to the stage, I would just like to recognize her and Okoa Uchumi Coalition, who just published a people's audit. It's a coalition of many civil society organizations, and they are bringing economic conversations into our living rooms. So I would like to just invite Sheila to come and speak about her experience and what civil society sees Raila Odinga as doing and being.